I remember about a year before I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, I was riding in an elevator, minding my own business, and eating a Snickers bar. The doors opened a few floors before I had to get off, and an older gentleman walked on. He took one look at me, took one look at my Snickers bar, and he said, "If I ate that Snickers bar, it would kill me." And I'm like, "What?" I'm like, "Do you have a peanut allergy or something?" He's like, "No, I'm diabetic." Well, that was the first thing that went through my head over and over and over again as I sat on a hospital bed in 1993 after being diagnosed with type 1. But how did I get to that hospital bed? Well, today I want to share with you my diagnosis story. It was the 1990s and I was in college at the University of Rhode Island. Shout out to my roadie friends. Anyway, I was sitting in my sorority house about to eat dinner. By the way, I was in Alpha Delta Pi, but I have to point out, definitely not the same kind of 80 Pi that there are currently some viral videos on social media going around that make it look like a really freaky cult. Seriously, you need to Google it if you don't know what I'm talking about. Anyway, back to my story. I was waiting for dinner when suddenly my tongue and lips went completely numb. It felt like pins and needles on the inside of my mouth. It was a freaky feeling, and I asked my friends if anyone else ever felt like this when they were hungry, and they all just stared at me. So I just ate my dinner and carried on. This strange feeling repeated itself often throughout the rest of my senior year, and I experienced a lot of other weird symptoms on and off, and it seemed like I always had something that just wasn't quite right. To me, it always seemed to occur during happy hour or a party when I was having a great time, and then all of a sudden I was just overcome with this need to eat. And then after I ate, I always felt better. So I decided to diagnose myself with hypoglycemia because I thought it sounded cool at the time, and it seemed to make total sense, right? No medical degree needed here, I knew it all. For the record, kind of still do. So because I always had some strange symptom going on in my body, I went to health services a lot when I was in college. And during every visit, the doctor would say that he wanted to test my blood or take a blood draw. And I was completely petrified of needles. Completely ironic now, I guess. But yes, I was super scared of needles. And once I realized I was an adult and I could turn down getting my blood taken, nobody could force me to do it anymore, I rejected the blood work at every single physical examination that I had. And that was a really foolish move on my part because I could have been diagnosed so much earlier, but instead it took another year. I showed them, didn't I? Now I need to throw in a little backstory here. While I was working towards my bachelor's degree, I somehow got pneumonia twice. Once in my sophomore year and once in my junior year. Both times I went to the hospital directly after taking my LSATs. That's the test you take to apply to law school. Well, I never became a lawyer because I changed my mind, as any woman worth her weight in glitter has the right to do multiple times. But at one point, I really did think I wanted to be a lawyer, so I studied hard, I spread myself too thin, I didn't get enough sleep, I had too much of a social life, and I let my body wear down. And this led to double pneumonia. I never fully recovered from it the first time, and it returned a few months later, and my parents, that's them, immediately yanked me out of school and made me come home for a few weeks to really rest and recover. As a side note, if you're curious, I did great on my LSATs, but I can't say the same for the people who were sitting around me and wanted to wring my neck while I was coughing up a lung and disturbing them. But I imagine by this time in their lives, everything's fine, they're doing whatever they want, and there's no hard feelings, right? Okay, so why am I telling you this? Because I am convinced that this is what brought on this lovely disease that likes to wreak havoc with me every few days. I've always believed that the breakdown of my immune system triggered some cell that otherwise would not have been angry enough to turn on me and give me the sugar. I'm not sure I even had this stupid cell to begin with. There's no family history of diabetes, but I just got lucky, I guess, right? I also do scratch-off lottery tickets religiously just for this reason. I'm a lucky girl. So I graduated college and got a job waitressing until I landed my dream job, which ended up to be not so dreamy, but I think I'll save that for another video, which I'm going to call The Devil Wears Prada, the sequel. I started on my career path doing public relations and marketing for a well-known fashion company. Before I started, I had to have drug testing done. So when I went to the doctor for a blood draw, I asked him to check me for Lyme's disease too, because I was really, really tired now all the time. My doctor decided to do a full panel of tests on me since he was drawing blood anyway. I had no choice in the blood draw this time. If I wanted the job, I had to take the needle. So now cut to my very first day at my very first job, and I receive an alarming call from my doctor. When the receptionist announced I had a call, I was very confused. I was like, uh-oh, who could be calling me on my very first day? Who even knows I'm here? Wait a second, I know who knows I'm here. My doctor. So I picked up the phone and my doctor says, Well, I have good news and bad news for you, Laura. Which one do you want first? Well, I want the good, thank you. Please. Well, the good news is you passed your drug test. No surprise there. Slightly freaking out now, I take a deep breath and ask for the bad news. He then tells me that my blood glucose level had come back at 475, and that would mean that I was diabetic if he was right. He was shocked, so was I, because I didn't exhibit any common symptoms of the disease, that I told him anyway, or that I even was able to pinpoint in myself. He really believed it was a mistake. So did I, actually. Deep down I was like, this is a mistake. But he had this sense of urgency about him, and he ordered me to leave my work on my first day at my new job immediately and get to the hospital for testing. I started having what was the first of to be many anxiety attacks in my life, and back to the lab I flew. Funny thing is, I remember exactly what shoes I had on, these heart-patterned Prada shoes with these red lacquer heels on them. In fact, I still have them. All throughout my life, I always seemed to associate major events with the clothing I was wearing. Back in my fashion days, I had a fabulous network of friends who all worked for fabulous designers, and we all shared very generous discounts free with each other. But besides the shoes, much of my D-Day was a blur. I know I had my blood drawn again, and I know the results were near 600 this time. Yikes. No wonder I was feeling sick all the time. I was admitted to the hospital, hooked up to IVs, and practiced giving insulin shots into oranges. I really had no clue that at the age of 23 I could be diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, but here I was, slapped in the face with it. Right after I was diagnosed, I seemed to miraculously get better. I thought I'd been cured. I honestly thought I was the first person on this planet to develop type 1 diabetes and then somehow get rid of it. I even argued with my doctor that this was possible. I believed I was cured. Well, that was wishful thinking. There's a first time for everything, right? What I really had experienced was called the honeymoon phase, which is a span of time that occurs right after diagnosis usually, where there's a huge decline in the need for insulin, and the diabetes almost seems like it goes away. So much for me being able to shake this disease and become a case study and an anomaly of the medical and scientific world. But then, after I had my first baby, the same cure repeated itself. I didn't eat insulin for 4 days after having my baby boy. I was again convinced that I had been somehow restored to my pre-diabetic self and somehow conquered this condition by having a baby. Stranger things have happened, right? You know, my son once told me about this disorder called alien hand syndrome. It's a neurological disease in which the afflicted person's hand appears to take on a mind of its own and can try to strangle the owner. If something like that actually exists, surely a random healing of diabetes must also be possible. This all makes sense in my head. Sometimes you want to believe something so much that you can actually talk yourself into it happening. Unfortunately, this wasn't the case. Having a baby does not cure diabetes. There would be a lot more babies in this world if it did. So let me make a full circle back to that man in the elevator again. I know better now, and I feel bad for that guy. He was completely uneducated about his condition that he lives with every single day, and for who knows how long he's had it for. He had no idea he could consume candy and still remain alive and kicking with the rest of us. There are over 100 million people in the United States with diabetes, and 1.25 million of them have type 1 just like me. There's over 415 million people in the world and counting with diabetes, and every single one of us has a diagnosis story. And I would absolutely love to hear yours. So please share with all of us in the comments section below, and don't forget to hit the thumbs up for this video and subscribe to my channel. And I will see you soon. Bye bye.